I cannot change the system. I would
Right.
love to change the system. Rage against that machine. I cannot.
We are the armed attorneys. Today, we're talking about what happens when the police completely destroy your house and whether you get compensated or not. This comes up in a couple of different contexts: when they're just doing their ordinary policing, when they arrest you as part of a self defense investigation.
When they cut open your pillows in your living room searching for drugs.
Sure. But before we begin, show your support for the Second Amendment by hitting that like button. And today's video is brought to you by our friends over at Sonoran Desert Institute. Check them out at sdi.edu/armed-attorneys. And speaking of things that aren't cheap, think about your entire house getting destroyed. We got to talk about identity theft because it is in the same category.
In 2022, the US FTC reported that Americans lost $8.8 billion to identity theft and fraud, a 49% increase from 2021. But you can protect yourself now for a fraction of the cost. And that's why I'm excited to tell you about today's sponsor, Aura.
You've heard me tell this story before. I tried it out for myself. I Googled one of my sister's phone numbers and immediately found her home address, which is pretty scary because she is a former prosecutor and her information is supposed to be hidden by law. And that's where Aura comes in. Aura has almost every internet safety tool you'll ever need, all inside one app. Aura's app features a VPN, password manager, real-time credit, and identity theft monitoring, and protects your devices from malware.
And on top of data breach notifications, Aura proactively identifies data brokers, exposing your information on the web, and automatically submits opt-out requests on your behalf. They'll even opt you out of junk mail and telemarketing lists.
Let Aura do the hard work of keeping your information safe online. If you sign up right now, Aura will give you a 2-week free trial with our link. Go to aura.com/armedattorneys to start your free trial. It's also linked below in the description, or scan the QR code on screen. Now, today we're talking about a case where there was a standoff in McKinney, Texas. This happened in summer of 2020. A man took a 15-year-old hostage in a house. Police did what the police are going to do, caused a ton of damage. And we just recently got an opinion out of the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. But this is a great case, I think, to illustrate a lot of kind of sentiments we see in the Second Amendment community, takings clauses, taking property, taking people's money, livelihood, those types of things. And then also just what we call Section 1983 claims, when the government violates your rights and what's the remedy to these wrongs. So there's a lot to unpack here. And I think there's some good lessons along the way. But what are we talking about?
The Second Amendment community, you guys are, I think probably conservatives in general, I think that we are the bastion of fairness and justice and wanting things in the world to be right. This is a wonderful example of how that's just not how it works. So what we're talking about is really a legal abuse of an innocent human being. So we've got, Richard described this hostage situation in a home, and the homeowner is a completely innocent party.
Yeah,
right?
Vicky Baker. Yeah, that's our homeowner.
Hands clean. She has done nothing wrong. In fact, she has tried to aid the police in getting this 15-year-old back. And in the process of, her house is just utterly destroyed. Utterly destroyed. And it's one of those instances where you would think justness and right and everything that's good would say this woman who aided law enforcement in helping retrieve a child being held hostage would not have to come out of pocket hundreds of thousands of dollars because they destroyed her house.
Yeah, but we have our fleeing fugitive, have our hostage held up in her garage. Police, use lots of tear gas grenades, use a small bomb on the door of her garage. But ultimately, everybody recovered. I don't think anybody, even in the case here, said the police were acting unnecessarily. Obviously, there was an emergency here.
She and her lawyers agree it was necessary damage. I guess it wasn't hundreds of thousands of dollars, but still a lot of money.
Yeah.
A lot of money, right? They agree. The police did everything they had to do to get the kid back, to resolve the situation. Fine.
Now, where does that leave us? Well, she sues the city of McKinney, on 2 different theories. One, Fifth Amendment takings. We can't just take people's property without just compensation.
Unless you're the ATF.
Ooh,
ATF exception.
Jab in, not even the ATF video. And then the other theory was a violation or deprivation of her rights. That's what we call a Section 1983 claim.
Mm-hmm.
The trial court doesn't really get to the 1983 claim, just looks at the takings clause and awards Miss Baker $60,000 for the damages done. Now, I think there's something very cool worth noting here in just kind of the principles that the homeowner was on. And what is that?
So, again, I think nice woman looking for justice as she was. Before this is litigated, the city actually makes an offer to her to pay her what she's owed in settlement. And she says essentially, no. What I want is to actually settle this law because it is currently unsettled. And I want to make sure that this never happens to anyone else. I want to know that people after me who are in this sort of situation are going to be made whole. So I'm going to trust the judiciary
Bam.
bah, to do the right thing. And then, of course, what happens?
Well, so they don't reach a settlement, but the court awards her damages, $60,000.
Mhm.
Now,
They
up in-
did the right thing.
yeah, up until this point, I think it's worth noting a lot of people in the community donated to her to try to help make her whole. But then it went up to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, and they reversed the trial court. Effectively, now her recovery is $0, and they rest on the tradition of the takings clause and an exception to the takings clause, which is emergency police powers and this kind of qualified immunity. You hear these two things kind of intermingled together, but that's what they rest their hat on. And now she gets goose egg.
She gets nothing. And this is so, and again, we talk to y'all constantly. And I talk to my clients and, we get a case dismissed. And then they say, okay, I need to be made whole. How do I sue the police?
Yeah.
How do I had to pay attorney's fees. I had to pay for my bond. I had my reputation dragged through the mud.
And maybe I lost my job having to go to court every month.
Right? I deserve some sort of compensation for that. And they do deserve it, but they're not going to get it. And this is just part of our long-standing tradition in the United States that the government gets to abuse you kind of a lot. And the courts will say, yeah, sure. This is what we do.
Is tradition.
All right. This is what we do. And then your remedy is bupkis. I mean, there's nothing you can do. And I know people get really mad at me sometimes when they call and they're like, hey, I want to sue the government for arresting me for this. And I'm like, you can try, but you're just going to put out a lot more attorney's fees and you're going to get nothing. And, it's like when I say something people think is unfair, they're like, well, you must be a bad lawyer. And it's like, I cannot change the system. I would love to change the system. Rage against that machine. I cannot. The only thing I can do is give you the best advice humanly possible to try to keep you from digging yourself into a worse hole that the government's already put you in. But
yeah, can't change the system. Asterisk, we are going to try to get a bill filed next session that would allow people to recover for deprivation of Second Amendment rights.
Right, but that's how you change the system, right? You don't change the system by being like, let's file a lawsuit anyway, and let's, because unless you're a millionaire,
unless you're changing the law.
Right. I mean, unless you have the exact right case, the exact right facts, you can afford to litigate it and you can afford to lose, right? Then the way you change it is by drafting a bill. So here we are.
But a couple of different scenarios that come up in these discussions, especially when it relates to self-defenders or, I got a door kicked down, or maybe they were serving a warrant, or I had a safe destroyed when they were executing a search warrant and seizing firearms. And even at the end of the day, let's say you're acquitted, you're found not guilty by a judge or a jury, you're a free man at that point. Do you get compensated for all of these wrongs along the way? The answer is no.
No. You get the tar beat out of you by police and you weren't, resisting or being dangerous. Yeah, you're going to get some money. It's still, that's not worth it for me.
Yeah.
But you're going to get some money. But generally speaking, and each circuit has interpreted the 1983 clause differently, which is sort of our money maker in terms of suing the federal government or suing the state government or the city government, so on and so forth. If you live in the Fifth Circuit, right? If you're in Texas like
you
us,
are screwed.
You're screwed. The Fifth Circuit has really, really neutered 1983 to the point that it's very hard to recover.
A judge could order somebody into custody, have them forgotten about, and left in there for a year, and the judge has absolute immunity.
In the Fifth Circuit, they do.
That's how bad things are.
Yes, it is bad.
But I think that's the lesson here and what we could benefit from. And that lesson is to make yourself a small target, minimize liability.
Right. And a small target, again, from the government. I think people are, I applaud y'all for believing in justice. But, we talk to people who are like, well, that's an unjust law. And if it comes down to it, I'm going to break it. And then I'm going to, fight the system. And it's like, make yourself a small target to the government, right? Because there is essentially I mean, there is no greater power that can really mow you down other than our own government. And, we try to fight against them. I mean, that's part of what the Second Amendment is for, to try to keep them in check. Lawyers, believe it or not, as much as a lot of y'all hate us, defense attorneys keep the government in check. That's part of what we do. But there is just so much that you cannot control and you will be abused. So I think I like Richard's takeaway a lot.
Yeah, and when it comes to all of us, I mean, there is a place in society for civil disobedience, but civil disobedience comes with some negative consequences, and
Comes at a cost.
yeah, and so just being fully aware of that risk calculation, I think that's important as well. But we hope you enjoyed this discussion. If you did, consider subscribing, hitting that like button, and help us fight the anti-2A algorithm by sharing this video.
And always question and comment for us below. Until next time, we're the Armed Attorneys. In 2022, God, what is wrong with us today?
Internet parental controls and protects your devices from malware. Malware.
Wow, wow.
Wow.
Wow, wow. Wow, wow,
Right.
wow. Like Charlie Brown.
Yeah.